Classes are the most important way of classifying brawlers in Brawl Stars, splitting up the brawlers into general classes in order to help players, and new players especially, to understand what brawlers are similar to each other and in what way. But a name isn't really enough to fully understand these classes. So in this video, I'm going to take a look in depth at each class, giving a summary about what each class does, their strengths, their weaknesses, a perfect example of a brawler from the class, and an example of a brawler that probably doesn't deserve to be in that class. I've noticed a lot of you guys who watch my videos aren't subscribed, so if you watch these videos, consider subscribing. Second, join our Discord server. We have some fun stuff to do there, like our very own 1v1 rank called Gauntlet, where you can win fairly. Finally, consider becoming a channel member if you're interested in supporting out the channel and have ample disposable income for some cool perks. First off, let's talk about the largest and most recognizable class in the game, the damage dealers. The purpose of these guys is quite self-explanatory, dealing damage. But damage comes in all shapes and sizes. You have Shelly that deals a whole lot of damage at a very close range, Colt, who deals a lot of damage at a long range, Nita, who deals a lot of damage in tandem with their spawnable, and Mo, who deals no damage at all, but is considered a damage dealer for some reason. But you see the general idea. The brawlers in this class's primary objective are to deal damage to the enemy, or at least the enemy's safe. These brawlers often follow a standard pattern overall. Above average health, but not too high. Above average range, but not too high. But obviously, the damage is where they stand out. The damage dealer class is honestly the most diverse class in the game. Think about it. Big damage can come in all shapes and sizes, but the other classes are often restricted by one thing. For example, tanks are restricted by only having high health, and artilleries are restricted by only being able to throw attacks over walls. Because of this, the damage dealer class isn't really good at one specific game mode, nor is it bad, and is generally used everywhere dependent on the map. But if you held me at never listening to Lil Uzi again point, I would have to say Knockout is their best mode. The high damage, above average range, and above average health is a great combination for Knockout, which isn't as long range focused as Bounty, so brawlers like Pearl, Rico, and Eve can be lethal there, among others. Heist is probably their second best game mode, with the entire game mode being based around dealing damage. So some of these guys are better than others in dealing a lot of damage to the safe. Finally, my pick for the perfect damage dealer would probably have to be Colt. He doesn't really fit into any other class other than maybe Markmen, but only with his star power, and he has the potential to deal incredible damage. My pick for the least perfect damage dealer is Tara. Her main attack and super deals solid damage, but damage dealing isn't really her point. It's pulling enemies with her super, and the super itself, combined with the threat of it, definitely helps in controlling areas and even breaking important walls. This wouldn't be the best fit of course, but I think she would fit a little bit better as a controller than as a damage dealer. An honorable mention goes to RT. Next up, let's talk about the tank class. As mentioned earlier, the tank class is quite restrictive, and most brawlers behave the exact same, quite unlike the damage dealer class. The tank class are characterized by obviously their large health, but they have several other defining characteristics. One is having relatively short ranges and having an extremely vital super, that it's often an approach tool. Most tanks are quite reliant on their super to be a threat in the game, and often tank a lot of damage in order to move up and get their super, which is helped along by the tank trait. Tanks have pretty specific weaknesses to specific brawlers, especially brawlers like Lou, Surge, Colette, Gale, and Clancy. The big themes of their weaknesses are big damage at short range to melt down the tank, or some type of crowd control ability like a knockback, a slow, or a stun. As for strengths, they are best against brawlers who are not great at a short range or have a low DPS. This includes brawlers like Sprout, Jean, or Mortis, who either get destroyed by the tank at short range, or just don't have enough DPS to deal with the tank. Tanks are mostly good in game modes like Hot Zone and Brawl Ball, where the tank can either get valuable time staying on the zone or have enough health to score in Brawl Ball. Tanks are quite bad in Knockout and Bounty due to not having nearly enough range to deal with anyone, though Daryl is an exception. The brawler I believe best represents the tank class is Frank, for quite obvious reasons that I probably don't need to go into. The brawler I believe worst represents the tank class is Meg. She never really fit for me, having quite a lot of range, not really relying on her super, and not really having a lot of health. She also doesn't have the tank trait and turns into a squishy marksman once she's out of her mecha. If I had to choose any other class for her, I would probably have to go with the damage dealer for the constant damage that she deals, along with the super which deals a lot of damage. Now, let's talk about the marksman class. This is another restrictive class, consisting of brawlers with quite a long range. These brawlers are generally best at sniping from a long distance, and have solid but not great damage. Usually they have a squishy health and are overall not great at a short range, or even a mid-range in the case of someone like Brock. These brawlers generally are the ones that go without using their super the most, and they are still very good brawlers without using their super, much unlike the tank class. The marksman class are mostly weak to aggro brawlers like assassins, and to a lesser extent that's much more map dependent, tanks. Assassins and tanks usually have a fast movement speed, and so they're able to dodge the marksman projectiles the best. And they're also good at a short range, which is another one of the big weaknesses of the marksman class. Marksmen also have a niche weakness to brawlers with spawnables, like Mr. P or Eve, as most marksmen don't have piercing attacks, so they're easily pushed back and forced into difficult positions. Marksmen are best against controllers, who often don't have enough range to deal properly with the marksman, and don't have the speed to reliably dodge the marksman's shots, and aren't great at short range themselves. Marksmen are usually best in Bounty and Knockout, where most of the maps are quite open, so the marksman can thrive with the open map, and can do well against basically everyone, including their usual weaknesses due to the range advantage. Marksmen are probably the worst in Brawl Ball, as none of the Brawl Ball maps are really that open, so the marksmen don't really have the same range advantage they could use in Knockout and Bounty. The best representation of the marksman class to me is Belle. I would have said Piper, but her hypercharge exists, so no. Belle is best at a long range and is okay compared to other marksmen at a short range, but still isn't that great. She has below average health, and her super isn't essential for her to be good, as it's arguably one of the least reliant supers out of all the brawlers in the game. The worst representation of the marksman class to me is Maisie. She doesn't have a really long range, and she has quite good health. She's not really good on any of the traditional sniper maps or modes, and is more like a controller or a damage dealer than a marksman to me. Bonnie gets an honorable mention. Now, let's talk about the artillery class. Artilleries are quite simple. They can throw projectiles over walls. Because of this powerful ability, they often have difficult shots to consistently hit, like Sprout or Dinah's attack. They're also characterized by their very low health, and their pretty trash ability to defend themselves at a short range. These guys are mostly weak to assassins and tanks like marksmen, for basically the same reasons: fast speeds and strength at a short range. And just like marksmen, they're probably best against controllers, who don't have any special abilities or stats to defend themselves well against throwers. Also, a big strength of theirs is against slow brawlers. Since artilleries have difficult to hit shots, having a brawler that can't really dodge well against these shots makes these artilleries quite powerful, making it a great matchup for them. As for their best modes, this is actually very heavily map/brawler dependent. First of all, there has to be some types of walls for the throwers to utilize and not be used as target practice. After that, it gets a little bit more complicated. Larry, Juju, and Barley are more controlling throwers, and likewise, they're good at modes like Hot Zone, Gem Grab, and Brawl Ball. Dynamite is a wild card and is really dependent on the map, and the player, I'm talking to you, bad randoms. Grom, Sprout, and Tick, who are more squishy and have a longer range, are the best in knockout and bounty, similar to Marksmen and can hold their own even in open maps. The Artillery are all unique in their own way, and in my opinion, they are all great examples of, well, throwing projectiles over walls and having low health. However, if I did have to pick one that didn't represent the Artillery class too well, it would probably have to be two brawlers actually, Larry and Juju. These guys are just so well rounded that they can be used in a lot of places, and sometimes feel like more controller than artillery, especially with their spawnables and their ability to hold their own at a close range. Now let's talk about another diverse and interesting class, the controllers. These guys are characterized by their uniqueness from each other, all having pretty unique mechanics, though they all have the same basic purpose, controlling areas, or brawlers in the case of Willow. They also have all really average health, damage, and range, and basically most other stats, not really standing out like some of the other classes. These guys are the best in game modes like Gem Grab and especially Hot Zone, which was basically made for them. These modes require having a good area controller in order to control the flow of gems in Gem Grab, or control the zone in Hot Zone. They are probably the worst in Bounty, as they don't really have enough range to deal with the marksmen who run rampant in this mode, and their controlling abilities is less useful in a game mode based around kills, and not controlling an objective like Hot Zone or Gem Grab. As for their strengths and weaknesses, we already went over their weaknesses against marksmen and throwers, but they are generally good against tanks, with a lot of these guys having crowd control abilities, which generally hard counters tanks and can generally hold their own against the tank class itself, or at the very least, charge up their super easily. Someone who I believe represents the controller class the best has to be Lou, who you rarely see get extravagant stats. Yet his impact stretches far beyond the numbers, somewhat like Dennis Rodman, with his ability to freeze enemies for his team, and most importantly, control big areas with his super. You can't get more controlling than Lou's super, which forces enemies away from a big area, and can halt their progress for what feels like an eternity. Someone who I believe doesn't represent the controller class well, and probably should be in another class if it wasn't for a great pun opportunity, is Willow. I mean, it's self-explanatory. She can throw over walls, and is extremely similar to Larry and Barley, yet is considered a controller because she controls people. Now let's talk about the assassin class. The assassin class are brawlers whose main goal is to assassinate, finishing off enemies or excelling in 1v1 situations to kill a specific brawler. These guys are all over the place, with some being squishies, some being tank brawlers. Others excel at short range, and others can hold up with marksmen at a long range. And even others rely on movement abilities for their assassination. You get the point, like damage dealing and controlling, assassination comes in all shapes and sizes. Assassins are probably the best in game modes like Knockout, Brawl Ball, and Gem Grab. They're great in Knockout because they're great at getting kills without having to worry about range issues or losing stars like Bounty. In Gem Grab, assassination becomes very important as these guys are the best for taking out the enemy gem carrier, as brawlers like Cordelius can single out the gem carrier and force them into a 1v1, potentially turning the tide of the game. Finally, in Brawl Ball, getting kills is also very important for obvious reasons, so assassins are very solid there. They don't really have a worse mode, to be honest, and have uses in all modes, but if you put me to never listen to Kid Cudi again point, I would have to say Bounty, purely for their lack of range, though some of these assassins do counter marksmen. The brawler who I think represents the assassin class the best has to be Cordelius. His super is textbook assassination. Get a brawler into 1v1 situation and kill them, or finish off an already weak brawler. It's silent and deadly, like a true assassin, and to me, it's what a perfect assassin is. As for someone who doesn't represent the assassin class, well, it's probably Sam. He doesn't really do much actual assassination, and often plays more like a tank than an assassin, and his high health, short range are more indicative of a tank. Last but not least is the support class. So support class brawlers are another very diverse class, but they all have one thing in common. They support the enemies. What's that? They support teammates? My bad, I got it mixed up. The support class have one thing in common. They support their teammates in various ways. Brawlers like Pam, Byron, support their teammates through heals, while brawlers like Max and Russ support their teammates through stat buffs. Furthermore, these guys are characterized by their lackluster stats, meaning that they should need teammates in order to be utilized fully, though that isn't always the case. I'm looking at you, Gus and Byron. As for their best modes, they don't really have a single great or terrible mode. They're used pretty equally in each mode, and it really comes down to more of the brawlers themselves and their own weaknesses and strengths, rather than the class as a whole. Someone like Gus or Byron is better at Knockout and Bounty, while someone like Pam or Poco is better in Hot Zone. Once again, the same thing mostly applies for the general weaknesses and strengths for the support class. Barry has similar weaknesses to Artilleries, while Doug has similar weaknesses to tanks, for example. Finally, the brawler I think represents the support class the best is Poco. It's simple, he doesn't fit in at all to any other class, and his super, gadget, and star power give very valuable heals to his teammates to help keep them alive and support them. The brawler I think least represents the support class, or at least his players do, is to absolutely no one's surprise, Kit. He is rarely used for his healing other than in cheesy comps, and is surprisingly a very good assassin. This is due to his super and gadget combination, with his gadget letting him sneak onto enemies and unload quick shots, and then finishing off the enemy with a stunning super. As a bonus, let's talk about the former hybrid class, made up of Lou, Gale, and Daryl. Daryl I can understand, as he's a bit of a blend of a damage dealer, tank, and an assassin. He has all the traits and features of a regular tank. He deals extremely large amount of damage up close like Shelly, and his super is similar to Fang and lets him get up close to assassinate enemies. Gale and Lou, however, no idea, other than the fact that the controller class didn't exist yet, so this was the only classification Supercell could think of for them at the time. Overall, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, even if it was a bit obvious at times. I hope you learned something or found something interesting in the video. Anyway, thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server. And a big thank you to Bronze Knight for helping me out with this video.